Sri Aurobindo explains that the Kena Upanishad is not describing the unreality of this world, but only the incompleteness and inferiority of our present existence, which is a part of a larger superconscious existence. We ourselves belong there or originate there, having entered into the experience of this lower result, inferior working, fringe, outer fringe of that greater existence. We have, as if on our surface, forgotten what that is like. There is a beautiful symbol that Plato develops in his book, The Republic, which articulates this relationship in a certain image of people in a cave who are chained prisoners, made to face a wall on which the fire behind them throws shadows. And let's say others or themselves in their movement cause the shadows in front. And because they are chained and fixed, they cannot look behind, they cannot see the cause of the shadows or the source of the light, the fire. Seeing only the play of shadows, they think that is all the reality. The image is taken deeper by Plato, where he describes how if someone holds an object and you see its shadow on the wall, you name the shadow. You say, this is flower, this is tree, this is book. But are you really seeing the object itself? You never really know the object. You know its shadow and you give it names. But both the name and the form are not it. And there is a kind of a liberation where, when freed from the chains, you get up and turn around. Not only you see the source of the fire, but the objects of which you have been looking at shadows all this while. And then for the first time you recognize what the thing is. Our human life is very similar to this. In practically everything that we touch, we see, we experience, we create, we speak of, even our thoughts and emotions are as if shadows and reflections of things which are in themselves divine in their origin. But we are as if unable to see that because our consciousness is imprisoned in this limited surface experience. So Sri Aurobindo uses 3 words: outer fringe, lower result, inferior working of something beyond, a superconscient existence in which all the things exist of which we play with like toys or shadows here. In our own discussion earlier, we used the image of a child, a playpen, playing with toys, which each of which represents something greater in the larger reality, while the larger reality dwells upon and watches over the child and helps it to grow, so that one day it may become fully conscious and be able to step out of its limited pen and participate in the larger superconscious play. Plato uses a different image here. When the chains are broken, the prisoners released, they not only see the objects and the fire, but they step out of the cave. But in the first stepping out of the cave, they are overwhelmed by the intensity of the sunlight. And for a moment, their eyes are blinded by the intensity. And it would be an error at that point to say that the things outside are dark only because our eyes are not able to adjust initially. On the other hand, if once they have adapted to the light outside, if they were to turn back and re-enter the cave, then they would experience the cave as a great darkness. And so something similar takes place in us. As we awaken to the superconscient existence and begin to live more and more in that, there is a reversal of our consciousness. And that's why this passage Sri Aurobindo has described, the name of the chapter is The Great Transition. We have been reading his commentary, summary of the 4 things with which the Kena Upanishad connects our limited experience of reality with that superconscient existence. First, that is mind of our mind. Second, that is speech of our speech. And next, we are going to read that is sense of our sense and life of our life. In each of these that we have been reading last time and the time before, Sri Aurobindo has, in summary, described the limitations of our mind and our speech or creative power, described the completeness of the mind of our mind and speech of our speech in that subconscient existence, and briefly we have glimpsed what it is that limits in our surface experience. Later he will elaborate much more of how that limitation takes place and the means of the ascent. So the next sentence is describing our senses in relation to that superconscient sense. Our sense, a movement in stuff of consciousness, vibratory to outward impacts, attempting imperfectly to grasp them by labored and separately converging reactions, is only, that is our sense, is only the faulty image of a supreme sense. And what is that like? Which at once fully, harmoniously unites itself with and enjoys all that the supreme mind and speech create in the self-joyous activity of the divine and infinite existence. So that existence, superconscient, is a divine existence, it is an infinite existence, unlike here where everything is defined by limitations and finitenesses, there everything experiences a limitless infinity. There may be form, but the form itself is an expression of something limitless and infinite. And in that, all activity is self-joyous, meaning the activity does not cause you joy, there is a joy inherent already. Unlike in our human experience where I need to eat in order to feel satisfied. I need to do some activity in order to feel I have grown or to be happy. I'm dependent on some external condition or circumstance in order to be happy or satisfied. And if that is taken away, obviously I cannot have my joy. But there, inherently, everything is self-joyous. Every object, every being, every experience, every event is spontaneously filled with an underlying joy. And at best we may say, we play with the experience of varying colors of joy. But we ourselves in that are not seeking an external joy. We are already fulfilled, but only sample, taste and play with, not out of need, but simply as a way of expressing our own joy. So all is there created in the self-joyous activity of the divine and infinite existence. Created by what? By that mind of our mind that sees and conceives, and the speech of our speech which flows it into form, manifests it. And all of that being there, the divine sense of our sense, at once fully, harmoniously unites itself with and enjoys all that. So the characteristics there, at once, fully, harmoniously, and unites in the enjoyment. So 4 things. And we contrast it with the human experience. Our senses do not get it at once. It's most obvious when the light is low or our hearing is poor and we are straining to see or to hear. What did you say? Can you repeat again? What did you show me? Can you show it again? I struggle to see, to receive. And in the process itself, there are a series of translations. The light comes into my eye, it is converted, it goes to the brain, it is processed. Eventually, at some point, my consciousness catches it through all the translation. We have discussed this in great detail in the earlier chapter involved, where Sri Aurobindo comments on this, where 3 levels of distortions that he has described there take place in our sense perception. And therefore, we never directly see or instantaneously see. There is a lag, and there are a series of translations and distortions. Whereas that consciousness sees instantly, but it does not merely see it in a separate objective experience, it also unites itself with what it sees. So unlike the human experience where the object that I see, hear, know is outside me, and therefore the layers of translation required until it reaches my mind that finally recognizes. But still, between my mind and that object are all those layers still remaining. Even if my mind tries to grasp, at best it catches the surface part and creates an image of that surface inside itself, embraces the image, but never really knows it. So, that at once unites itself, but fully and harmoniously. Now, in the human experience, you may say, I also can unite with the object. Here's the food, I put it in my mouth, I chew and swallow, I'm united with the object. Now I know it as a part of me. But there are two words missing here, fully and harmoniously. What I have taken is a piece. Also, in the very act of eating, I have modified it. I cannot know it in itself. I cannot take the whole of it. The fruit that I eat is still to be plucked out from the tree. I can never experience the fruit that is on the tree. And of course, there are certain fruits which I cannot take in because they're too strong, too intense, or even poisonous. So there is a limited capacity to identify and take in, and even in the process of identification, actually we have never identified ourselves. We have only gone through a series of changes and translations. So we never get it fully. And second, harmoniously. How can you know something in identity without destroying the very thing that you seek to know? In the next sentence, he discusses how the life, when it tries to enjoy, it ends up consuming what it enjoys. And in the process, the enjoyment itself ends. We are able to do this to some degree when, for example, you go to see an object of art. You stare at this beautiful painting, sculpture, or even a person, or an animal, or a flower, and you take in. But that taking in is a refined taking in of the mind or the heart, partially. And that's the closest we can get to a harmonious absorption and identification. But there, in that existence, because all is held in an underlying unity, all can experience spontaneously identification with everything else. And therefore, the supreme sense at once fully, harmoniously unites itself with and is everything which that creative mind and speech has formed. In contrast, he says, our sense, a movement in stuff of consciousness vibratory to outward impacts. So what is really happening in our sense? There's a vibration in our consciousness in response to something else. But you do not know the thing itself, you only know the vibration. The vibration itself responds only to the surface of the thing, not the thing itself. As for example, we have a long conversation with somebody, asking them so many questions. What do you like? What do you do? What kind of thoughts do you have? What are your emotions? And we create a template of their personality in our mind. We embrace that and we say, I know you. But you never really know the person unless you experience an identity which you cannot in this divided state of consciousness. But if you observe carefully, in all attempts to interact with somebody, you're really trying to get a deeper glimpse and get some sense of an identification on a deeper level. But it stops short. So, vibratory to outward impacts, imperfectly, attempting imperfectly to grasp them by labored and converging reactions. You will recall the earlier discussion in a previous chapter where Sri Aurobindo discusses the 4 operations of any consciousness by which it is able to know something. And that particular 4-fold process in the divine consciousness is a single process with 4 facets. In the human mind, they become 4 separate processes. each of which offers its own particular perception of the thing you're trying to know, and somehow the four have to be brought into alignment and converged for the mind to be able to say, now I get it. So that's why he says, grasp by labored and separately converging reactions. And you still have to struggle. You said something very important. Let me fully understand that. And my mind has to keep running to grasp and, so to say, unpackage the full import of what was just said. And that labored process is really necessary because everything is separated, everything is fragmented. In a consciousness where all is held in an underlying unity, I feel, I know, I'm one with what I know. We get a glimpse of this sometimes in dream state. When you try to narrate the dream, you say, I met so-and-so and he said to me, and then you pause, well, I'm not sure he said because I don't remember him speaking, but I knew that he wanted to say, or this is what he was saying. You don't remember the words spoken, but you knew what the person meant. Because the communication is wordless, without speech. Instantly, in consciousness, something touches, knows from inside, and in your mind you translate it into words when you have to articulate it. But at that moment you just knew, and you knew deeply, intimately. And this is natural even in the vital worlds or mental worlds. In the spiritual consciousness, it's much more deep. The identification is much more profound. It's felt in the very substance, not just in knowledge, not just in emotion. So, we read the full sentence and you see how he captures both these domains and the nature of the divine sense versus human sense. Our sense, a movement in stuff of consciousness, vibratory to outward impacts, attempting imperfectly to grasp them by labored and separately converging reactions, is only the faulty image of a supreme sense, which at once fully, harmoniously unites itself with and enjoys all that the Supreme Mind and Speech create in their self-joyous activity of the divine and infinite existence. And so, mind of our mind, speech of our speech, sense of our sense, and finally, life of our life. What is that life like and this life, and in what way this is a reduced representation? Our life, a breath of force and movement and possession, attached to a form of mind and body, and restricted by the form, limited in its force, hampered in its movements, besieged in its possession, and therefore a thing of discords, at war with itself and its environment, hungering and unsatisfied, moving inconstantly from object to object and unable to embrace and retain their multiplicity, devouring its objects of enjoyment and therefore transient in its enjoyments. All this he has listed, I think 8, depending how you categorize. 8 different kinds of limitations. That is our life. And then the sentence continues, our life is only a broken movement of the one, undivided, infinite life, which is all-possessing and ever satisfied. Because in all it enjoys its eternal self, unimprisoned by the divisions of space, unoccupied by the moments of time, undeluded by the successions of cause and circumstance. So there are so many important ideas. It's such a rich sentence, not complex, but rich sentence. And for us, when we study, it feels not so interesting to view what are the limitations of our life, because we are so used to them, we don't realize that they are even limitations. So it helps when we first look at that life and conceive of it, at least to some degree, what that can be like, and that resonates with something deep within us. And then when we turn to look at this, yes, this is so limiting. It's obvious. So we look at the description of that first. He says, our life is only a broken movement of the one undivided infinite life. So he has used three descriptions. It is one undivided infinite, and then further, all possessing, ever satisfied, because, etc. The starting point is that it is one undivided and infinite. From there, everything else follows. If it was not one, if it was two or more pieces, aspects which are distinct enough, you would always find some lack, some limitation. I can go so far, I cannot go to that other. And so there will be a failure. Because it is one, inherently, everything is its own. There is no need of making an effort to know, to grasp, to experience, to enjoy. It's all there in myself, in my oneness. Second, it is undivided. Even if there was a oneness, and within that oneness there were certain distinctions and divisions, the two divisions eventually would move in their own impulse, and at some point they will collide. And so there will be a breakdown of the harmony. But because it is undivided, everything, all its movements are constantly in perfect harmony with each other. But if there was a limit, I can extend harmoniously, perfectly, but there's a limit, then again there would be a failure. So the third thing is infinite. That life can go all the way to all extent without limits and fully enjoy, know, possess, participate in, play with, without limits. The moment you put any limit in anything, that becomes a point where the enjoyment or the harmony breaks down. So these three things capture in their essence the full scope of that domain. One undivided infinite life. And then how does that life express and experience? Life which is all possessing and ever satisfied. And we experience dissatisfaction because we do not possess something. We crave because we struggle to reach out to possess. But when you possess everything, you do not crave, you do not struggle, but you have the satisfaction, but also a satisfaction which is itself without limit, complete, infinite. Satisfaction which is finite would not be satisfaction, because it would always know there's something more it cannot reach. Everything is infinite and all-possessing, and therefore ever satisfied. Because in all it enjoys its eternal self, unimprisoned by the divisions of space, unoccupied by the moments of time, undeluded by the successions of cause and circumstance. So we're going to look at these three shortly, but first, in all, it enjoys its eternal self without these three limitations. As long as there is an other that I have to enjoy or to know, as long as it is other, there will always be a sense of needing to reach out and only a partial identification. But because in all things it is myself in a different facet, aspect, form, therefore I already know me and can identify myself entirely in that. Now you see, this idea is extremely important, but the full sense of it we can only get when we take certain examples, which are very limited examples, but when you play the role in mime, in a drama of various personalities of the story, You entirely lean now to express this role, lean thereafter to express the other role, shift yourself to express a third role, and interact between all these roles. In this movement, at each point that you are playing a role, you know all the other roles perfectly, intimately. You know what they think, what is their personality, and yet you can experience as if they are another. You express yourself in a certain way and then surprise yourself by taking the other role and expressing in a different response, and you play across. But in each, you are fully in the participation and the relationship between the two of yourself. However complex you make it, you always are secure because you're one with the other, and there can never be something which is left out, which is missed, which is not you, which may cause a fear or a danger. Being in complete identification, there is an absolute security. All is myself. And if at all there is the appearance of contradiction or tension, it is only a play that I have with myself for the purpose of the enjoyment of my various facets. It is in this sense that the soul enters the human life, knowing the whole universe as its own body, knowing all forms and all things and circumstances as itself, across space, across time, in eternity, in infinity of space. And therefore, when it looks out at the world, this is a domain, a huge playground, where I can play out anything, push it to the ultimate extreme breakdown, and still I'm utterly secure. And that sense of freedom, that you can go anywhere to any extent and never lose yourself, that is the security with which the soul enters the experience of the world. On the surface consciousness, though, because we do not experience that oneness with all things, there is the fragmentation, there is the other and the unknown, which I fear, and so on, and all the rest of the conflicts which emerge from there. But here, it enjoys its eternal self in all. But the nature of that enjoyment is triple. In other words, there are three limitations not present there, but which exist in the human life. They are unimprisoned by the divisions of space, unoccupied by the moments of time, undeluded by the successions of cause and circumstance. These are three things by which our human experience is damaged. First, we are imprisoned by divisions of space. That is, everything is bound in its own separate box of form. This flower, this bee, this deer, this tiger, they are all, to my perception, separate boxes of objects inside which is a life, a mind, an intention which I cannot fully know. And while with the flower I feel relatively safe, with the bee I am a little afraid it might sting me, it might not. The deer I could still pat, but the tiger, I never know what its mood might be. And so there is this fear and tension, inability to identify and enjoy. In the way we look at it, we limit the form, in the form and in the shape of the form. But now think of it this way. The physical energy even, set aside other things for the moment, just the physical energy that is flowing in my body through my atoms is equally flowing through the ground, through these objects, through the air in between, freely. Take another example, the wind and the air that we breathe. The tiger breathes out the same air which I am breathing in. I breathe out the same air which it is breathing in. Or the flower, because its perfume comes into me, it is the same air which the flower has touched. If you think of it in those terms, you realize actually the differences are not so much. Take a step from there, the mind which is in me, the mind which is in the tiger, the mind which is in the flower, they are all part of one universal mind, of which a special knot and a special knot and a special knot appear here. And the energy behind is the same, flowing through. In fact, there is no real hard separation. So with this we can get a sense of what that divine life experiences when it plays in and through forms. As it pours through this form, it knows itself the same in all forms in the universe, and it flows through them all. And so tiger's life energy is my life energy. It's only my own other form, as is the flower or the bee or even the galaxy. Size is irrelevant. It is one life energy which is flowing. And so, one life enjoying its eternal self, unimprisoned by the divisions of space. And it is only such a free play flowing in life that can fully enjoy the true sense of the flow of life. You notice, in the human experience, what is the image we have of freedom? If you watch a movie, what's the sense in which you would represent the sense of freedom? There was a movie called Born Free, Living Free, and then Forever Free. It was about tiger cubs, I think. The concept was, here is something which the human beings have imprisoned, and then they are liberated. Free Willy is about a orca, I think, killer whale, liberated into the ocean. The image of freedom is always going out there, removed from limitations which were imposed. And you see, when you watch a movie like that, when finally this person struggling is liberated, there's this bursting out. The suggestion is going out into infinity. Always behind the sense of freedom is the sense of being liberated without boundaries. It's not enough if you say, out of this little fish bowl, I free you into the aquarium. That's not freedom. I free you into the ocean, because for the human experience, the ocean is infinite. But the idea is, it is not free unless it is liberated into infinity. So it enjoys its eternal self, unimprisoned by the divisions of space. And you'll see in the human action, it is always a spreading out of the hands, spreading out of your mind, spreading out of your energies. I remember seeing a narration of a lady who had spent most of her life bound in the responsibilities of family, kitchen, etc. And one day, her son took her, not in the same town, took her to another town. So now she's cut off from her normal life. He took her to the beach, and she stepped out on the huge beach, looking out to the ocean. And then spontaneously she began to run, waving her hands. Something she had not done for decades. Perhaps as a child she might have done it. But that movement was so spontaneous. The energy wanted to flow out and spread out and extend itself. And what's the best you can do? Your hands just spread out and your heart spreads out. Because finally you're bound to the body limitations. But the life energy inside is trying to reconnect to its fullness, which is infinite. Unimprisoned by the divisions of space. That's the nature of the life, of our life. But Sri Aurobindo uses this word unimprisoned. Why doesn't he use the word free? Because it's a very important... you see, Sri Aurobindo's usage of words is always so precise. The suggestion of unimprisoned is prison, by which you are not bound. In other words, the life energy is flowing through forms. It is playing inside forms, which are like the walls of the prison. But it's not bound by those walls in which it is playing. And we may use the image of the wind. The wind blows through the window of the jail cell and out through the door. While it is inside, it is this volume of air. but it is unimprisoned. So, free would be completely freed, removes the suggestion of forms. Unimprisoned by the divisions of space means there are divisions. There are forms within which this life force plays freely, but it is not bound by those forms. Unimprisoned. So, that life of our life is one undivided infinite life which is all possessing and ever satisfied, because in all it enjoys its eternal self unimprisoned by the divisions of space. So in all things, in all forms, it's enjoying itself unimprisoned by those divisions of space. But the divisions are there and it plays in and through those divisions. The second thing which distinguishes is unoccupied by the moments of time. So the same concept now we extend to time. Right now, I am stuck in this moment. The past is dead, the future is uncertain. I am bound in the now. Extend it a little more. Right now, in this particular class period, I am bound to this classroom. In this particular job, I am bound to these conditions. At this age in my life, I am limited to these things which I can or cannot do. In this lifetime, this is the nature of my body. I have 2 arms, 2 legs, or as some people have, some damaged limbs. But the reality is, when we step back and experience our timelessness, we are in eternity. And out of that station in completeness of eternity, we lean to project and concentrate ourselves to enter this experience of a transitioning time. And while we may identify and play with the moments of time, we are not really bound to them. We are not really occupied and stuck in. In the same sense which we had, the image we used of the wind blowing through the various cells and through the various forms, the same sense we can have of our consciousness blowing through the various steps or stages or moments of time. Knowing them all as ours, but now dwelling in, playing with, but not being bound by, unoccupied by the moments of time. Why does he use the word unoccupied? Because it is as if we have filled that time slot. We are identified with it. We occupy it. And the third thing which differentiates that life from this is undiluted by the successions of cause and circumstance. So in our experience of life, we say, this happened, which led to that, which led to the third, and therefore this was the outcome. And it seems as if when we look at things, that this is the reality. But when you look at the same perspective from a higher station in your own consciousness, I wanted to go from here to the beach. And so I took a left turn, then a right turn, and then I walked so many steps. And I reached the beach. But the person who is stuck in the spaces of time, in the limitations of space and time, will say, no, you turned left, you turned right and walked so many steps, therefore you reached the beach. Isn't it? The cause and effect chain is seen as primary, leading to that outcome. The reality for me is, I wanted to go to the beach. I used this as the means. I could have used another means. I could have leaped off from my roof and flown on wings and soared to settle straight on the beach. Well, at the moment I don't have those wings, but if one had the freedom, one could have gone through many ways, many passages. Whatever the chain you see in life is only an occasion, nimitta we say. It is an occasion for me to fulfill what I have already predestined in my freedom. And it is in this sense that the soul looks upon circumstances of life. It sets for itself a goal. Here, this is what I want to experience. And because it sets itself that goal, and because it is on some level connected with all things, its will, its pressure starts nudging all things. According to the looseness and plasticity of objects, they start getting pushed and nudged until eventually fall into place, and that outcome ends up. The human mind, stuck in the fragmentation of space and time, says, oh, this block moved, then that block moved, then that moved, therefore this happened. But the soul's freedom says, no, I freely chose that outcome, therefore the circumstances fell into place. You see, the chain of cause and effect with which we are so obsessed is secondary. In fact, it is the result of a higher, freer will which has predestined itself. The problem with the word destined is we feel as if some compulsion imposed on us. But the reality is, for the self, it is its free choice which becomes therefore the predestination for the fragmented consciousness. So what the soul sees in its freedom and wills to be and do in its freedom, that becomes in the machinery of space and time a chain of cause and effect which leads you to that outcome. And that's why we can say from the human life experience, if we get a glimpse of the soul's choice, we see that and we say, this thing is destined. Come what may, you may try to do whatever you like or you may try to oppose it all you want, eventually that will happen. But still we are looking at it in the world of chain of cause and effect. And so the thing looks contradictory. Predestination somehow overrides our free will. That's not really the truth. It is in fact our own true free will, which here in the fragmented free will, which is not really free will, it is more a series of compulsions, I see a reflected action of that direct free will. You can see how this lower reality and the higher reality are related. That influences this. This follows in its image, but as a shadow, as a superficial appearance. And what happens is each little thing nudged in its place somehow falls in alignment. If the first did not get nudged this way, the second could not get nudged that way. And so we say the first led to the second. But actually neither led to another. There was a pressure overall in all things. What was easiest to move, moved. What did not move, what was rigid, did not move. Once this moved, something else became easier to move, and it got pushed. This did not cause that. You see, from a certain perspective, from above, there is no such compulsion of chain of cause and effect. But from inside the system, we say, if this did not move, that could not have moved. The soul's freedom, it does not matter. You move what you like, eventually, because I'm pulling or pushing from all circumstances, eventually the whole thing will shape itself. If nothing else, as you can see, the universe is always progressing. The forms which are resistant to the divine will simply break down in time. And out of the more plastic parts, new forms emerge which are in tune with the divine will. So if you wait long enough, all that is contrary to your free will just falls, crumbles. And new things emerge which are in the perfect form of what you have already willed in your freedom or chosen as the fate or destiny. And so it's a question of whether it happens in a long time by such natural breakdown and emergence of what is true, or in a partial series of changes and shifts in the little pieces falling into place, which we then see as a chain of cause and effect. Eventually that which is willed always happens. And so this superconscious life, undeluded by the successions of cause and circumstances, it can enjoy itself. So we read the full sentence here. And the last part of the sentence. Our life is only a broken movement of the one undivided infinite life which is all possessing and satisfied, because in all it enjoys its eternal self, unimprisoned by the divisions of space, unoccupied by the moments of time, undeluded by the successions of cause and circumstance. So you see, so much is captured in a very short formulation. But now we link that free play of the divine life with our fragmented play. What's the relationship? He says, our life is only a broken movement of that one undivided infinite life. Broken because here the life force has to as if navigate from one piece to another, from one limitation to another, as if zigzagging through the least resistant passages of possibilities to fulfill itself, whereas there it moves straight to express what it is. See, just as an example, the soul, when it took birth, chose a certain a line of experience and growth. This is how I want to play and grow and learn. Then, through the personality, it has all these layers blocking its light. And so in the mind there is a programming. My parents said to me I should be such and such thing. In my emotions I am attracted to that particular form of activity because it somehow excites. In my body I have a limitation. I am not strong enough to be able to do that kind of activity. So I get pushed in a third direction. And through all these, I make compromises, steps. In practice, the programming of our life and of society is so dulling, so confusing, that you end up chasing the very opposite things of the soul's aspiration. But through those opposite things, the soul still nudges and gets you there. So look at it as an example. Most people, you will see, why do they work? What are they trying to do? I take up a job where I will earn money. Why? Because society put that as my reference. Earn a lot of money is your success. Alright, so I'm chasing after that. But behind that, I'm dissatisfied. I don't like this job. I'm not getting enough money. But if you ask yourself, why are you getting the money? What are you trying to do through the job? I want to be happy. I want to have peace of mind. I want to experience my freedom and my creativity. So what would you like to do? I would like to do all that, but I can't do all that because of the way society is arranged. I need first to get money. So I'm doing something which I don't like to do. And so you end up chasing all kinds of shadows. Whereas right there in front of you are the things which you know would give you the fulfillment and satisfaction, but either unsupported by the framework of society or by your own nature, by your own desires. Until I get enough money, I will not be secure. I can't take the risk of giving up a job in order to pursue this enjoyment or a greater delight of my deeper creative satisfaction, because I don't know what will happen tomorrow. So I need this security, then I will do that. And all of these are as if blocks and barriers within one's own personality and in the collective life arrangement, which is all, let's say, false forms. The forms are false, but each form is trying to express something which deep within you is true. And so we created this, and so we created that. Because we felt that everybody should have a certain security, so we created a certain structure of society. And if you look at the big picture of time, really going across thousands of years, you will see at different stages in different cultures, different structures were created to help the very fulfillment of the human spirit. And they created something which, of course, in the very formation was damaged and limited. And then it broke down because it failed to work. Something else emerged, which broke down. Something else which emerged, which broke down. Through it all is the larger will of evolution leading inevitably to something. Because that is pushing, an insufficient form eventually breaks down and gets crushed, and new forms emerge, better aligned each time. And we are at this point today in human evolution, at one such transition. Everywhere there is uncertainty, Everywhere all the forms are breaking down. Everywhere there is increasing chaos because the forms don't fit anymore. On the other side, something is emerging which offers you a hope, a glimpse of something more spontaneous, more true, more free, more harmonious, more deeply satisfying. And we see that, and we see this, and there's a kind of a conflict. And we do not know how to manage this. So in fact, at present, humanity is undergoing a split. A part of humanity bound to the old forms, a part of humanity aspiring for the new forms and trying to grasp, clutch, and give them some kind of expression, always insufficient and so dissatisfying. But the split is very distinct. So in this passage which we have read just now, our life is only a broken movement of that free, spontaneous, one, undivided, infinite life. And as a result, all the limitations. And what are the limitations? Which we will look at in detail next time, but we reread them. Our life, a breath of force and movement and possession attached to a form of mind and body and restricted by the form, limited in its force, hampered in its movement. I'm unable to do what I want to do, what I know I should be able to do. Besieged in its possession. Whatever I have is precarious. I might lose it any moment. Eventually, I will have to lose it. And therefore a thing of discords, at war with itself and its environment. Although I try to do good, although I want to fulfill something, I cannot do it unless I enter in collision with something else. Someone else's need for good collides with my need for good, and someone has to fail in order for the other to succeed, or so it appears. A thing of discords, at war with itself and its environment, hungering and unsatisfied, moving inconstantly from object to object. And so because I am unable to fulfill, I am always struggling. Maybe this will satisfy, maybe this. And in the process, unable to embrace and retain their multiplicity. There are so many possibilities before me. What do I want really? Take a simple example. You go to a fancy restaurant with a very large menu. You'll find people spending half an hour discussing what shall we eat. Because there's so many options before you. It's so simple when you go to a restaurant which has only 5 items. Okay, here's the one. I don't like the others. But here I like so many of them. I want to experience all of them. How will I choose? There's no real basis except some kind of an impulsiveness that pops up. Today I will have this. Why? I don't know. I just feel like. Where does that feeling come from? Somewhere deep inside, layers within. But the best I can do is to have a piece. I cannot have it all. And you'll see often children do this when they go to a huge spread of food. They will take a little bit of everything. So that you have the satisfaction of having experienced it all, but the only way you can have that satisfaction is by taking a little bit of everything. You can't really enjoy it all. Well, that's the nature of this life, unable to embrace and retain their multiplicity, devouring its objects of enjoyment and therefore transient in its enjoyments. The very thing which you enjoy, you end up consuming it and suffocating it or destroying it in the process. And all this, our life, is only a broken movement of the one undivided infinite life, which is all-possessing and ever satisfied, because in all it enjoys its eternal self, unimprisoned by the divisions of space, unoccupied by the movements of time, undeluded by the successions of cause and circumstance. And that life is our super life, of which this life is a small portion, as if experiencing itself cut off, but all the time surrounded by, nourished by this larger consciousness. And therefore, we'll look at this text once again next time, but the point being, therefore, if we can in our consciousness free ourselves from the thing which binds us to this incapacity and divided state, If we can free ourselves, step back, and recover this fullness, which is ours, which is us, behind, then we can enjoy this life and all these objects and all these circumstances truly, fully, without this breakup, without this conflict. And that is the life which is called, referred to by the rishis as Amritam, immortality. Because it is a life which belongs to a consciousness that is utterly free and knows itself immortal. Operating and playing with all these forms, never deluded or bound in the error or limitation of the form. But this superconscious awareness is right now here, in us, around us. It's not something far off. It is only a question for us, taking the analogy of the image used earlier of Plato's trapped prisoners. It's only a question of dropping our shackles and realizing, stepping back to know this is what we are. And then re-embracing the life from this newfound freedom. So this is the theme which we will continue next time. In one of the aphorisms of Sri Aurobindo, he summarizes this relationship in this way. If mankind could but see, though in a glimpse of fleeting experience, what infinite enjoyments, what perfect forces, what luminous reaches of spontaneous knowledge, what wide calms of our being lie waiting for us in the tracts which our animal evolution has not yet conquered, they would leave all and never rest till they had gained these treasures. That is, within our own consciousness, in the layers not yet developed by our current evolution, all these things exist. Infinite enjoyments, perfect forces, luminous reaches of knowledge, and wide calms of being. And if you glimpse that, you would immediately direct all your energies to realizing that. But, he says, but the way is narrow, the doors are hard to force, and fear, distrust, and skepticism are there, sentinels of nature, to forbid the turning away of our feet from her ordinary pastures. So we are like cows grazing in the ordinary grass, and there are these sentinels which prevent us from experiencing these realities. But since it is the destiny of the soul, the free choice of the soul, these are inevitably going to be ours. The difference is only whether we go through the long winding passage of our slow evolution, or we make a conscious choice and rapidly attain to these possibilities, realize and manifest them in life, and make life perfect, beautiful, and truly satisfying and joyous. And this is what the Kena Upanishad wants to lead us to. So we continue this passage next Sunday. And now you can understand why the chapter is called The Great Transition. It's a transition, and a great transition, because once made, everything is so different thereafter.